You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. We're discussing the damaging World Press Freedom Report about Ghana. And my guests, Evans Mensah, Manasseh Azura Wene, Nanaya Mensah, Afil Moni, Liz from Asari, Ifiapokua, Sewa Amihe, and Okatiche, Frifa Mensah, media practitioner and the chief. Thank you, Okatiche Frifa Mensah, for joining us on Newsfile.
Thank you very much, Samson.
Right. So the journalists we have spoken to so far have been telling us what their reality is. Gauging that against the report, does your reality affirm the ranking, very embarrassing, that we have received? What are the facts?
Samson, thank you very much. I would like to apologize for joining the conversation late. I was actually working when I finished. That is when I had the chance to join the conversation. Talk of my reality. I'm sure everybody will attest to the fact that we don't need any reports anywhere to ascertain the dangers that faces journalists today in Ghana. Some of us have experienced this thing for the past 4 to 5 years, which led to us even moving from houses that we used to work for. It doesn't only happen through physical threats, but sometimes even when you are on air working, because the media houses we have in this country are largely owned by these politicians, they tend to tell you what to say, what not to say. They tend to send you a message when you say something and it doesn't go on well with them. They come out at you. Even when you are working, you receive so many messages from your bosses and say, why have you said this? Why do you say this? Why don't you say that? So it gets a bit frustrating that at some point you have to just tender in your resignation and leave, because it cannot be that you will sit down on a media platform and as you're working, you are being micromanaged like a robot. So that sometimes you have to just tender in and leave. Moving away from being micromanaged, which it happens to almost all the media practitioners in Ghana, especially those who are not paid well and are at the back pocket of the politicians. Then becomes the physical threat. Where
but before that, forgive me, before that, are you saying not wanting to be micromanaged is the reason you have moved from one media platform to the next?
Well, I wouldn't say that is largely the sole reason, but it was part of the reasons. In the run-up to the 2020 election, I was on another media platform, and in the course of doing my job, I used to have what they call emancipation movement, where I tried to emancipate the minds of the people, because I've said that the only reason this country is peaceful is because the people do not understand what goes on around them. So I tell them what is happening, present them with the facts, then emancipating them whatever they want to use those information for. But in the run-up to 2020 election, I had government officials coming from the top of my management and saying that, no, you cannot continue with that program anymore. In fact, it gets a bit frustrating. So if you don't want to do that, then what other option do you have? You have to just move away from that platform. So it was one of the reasons that made me tender in my resignation at where I used.
Okay, so that was a good thing you did, because the tenets of your profession are that you are supposed to be independent. If you lose that, you have lost everything. If anybody tried to dictate to me wrongly here from being independent, that's the very day I'll quit the job. And I've never had a situation where anybody attempted to dictate what I have to do, which is professional. Please proceed.
But something, not many of us can actually do what I did or what some of us will do. Because one, if you read the report touched on the fact that most journalists in this country are not being paid well. And you and I know when people are not paid well and they are the back pocket of the politician, obviously they lose their voices. Instead of being guard dogs for the people, they become watchdogs for the politicians. So why should such a journalist who is not being paid well by media owners be able to speak up and say that If you're going to take my voice away from me, then you should take up your job. Maybe the person doesn't have what he's going to feed on. So in this saying, I must encourage media practitioners and owners to pay journalists so they can have the self-confidence to be able to stand up to these kind of bullies that we are experiencing, especially under this regime. You know, one of the things happened, fiscal threat. Something as I speak to you, anytime I close from work or when I am going home in the evenings, because of the physical threat that has come closer to me, I needed to go and buy bulletproof. Bulletproof, which in the evenings when I am going home and I feel that I am not safe because somebody has called, you know, these hooligans who have been given these quotas and uniforms claiming to be national security. Meanwhile, they have no training in national security matters. They sometimes will call you, they will threaten you, telling you that we will come after you. Even just 4 days ago, there were some boys of this nature, these hooligans who are termed as national security at Koforidua, somewhere older state, sitting down saying that by 2024, the Okateche guy, we will deal with him. So if you get these kind of messages, then it puts you in a position where sometimes you don't even sleep home for 2-3 days, and you have to be making sure that your families are safe and all that. So the threats are real. It's not a joke.
But that's a serious one. Have you lodged a complaint formally with the police?
Well, behind the scenes I have, but I'll give details. In fact, I had to even talk to IGP at some point, which I told you some of the threats that are facing some of us. Look, aside you getting calls from these hooligans, you know we used to be part of this government one way or the other. So we have friends in the top positions who will call you and tell you that, Charlie, my people are not happy with what you are doing at all. So you have to be careful. It is a bit dangerous. Then you ask them, what is the worst that can happen? And they can go to the extent to do the worst that you can never happen. Trust me. They can do the worst because people that are in top hierarchy call you and warn you. Look, when I went for the 5th anniversary of the Asante Maam, I was wearing my cloth, doing my chieftaincy, and when I had security officials whispering to my ears that it is being discussed on various platforms that I have to be arrested in no time. It had to be the calling of one of my godfathers in Ghana to the National Security Minister to back up because it's of no use and it's not necessary. So aside these hooligans coming after you, the police is being used to intimidate people in this country. Wherever you find yourself working, you get your bosses coming after you because government says they are not happy with what you say or what you not say. What makes it a bit surprising to some of us who campaign vehemently for this government to come to power is that if these things were happening under Jerry John Rawlings, it would have been okay because everybody believes that he was from a military mindset, a dictator's mindset. If these things were happening under before, it would have been a bit okay because we were coming from J.J. Rawlings' era, which he couldn't be so sure what the media would do if he gives them the space. Professor Mills, because he was once a vice president to J.J. Rawlings, one would have thought that he would come in with the British mindset. He never did. John Mahama used to be J.J.'s boy, so obviously people think that he will come in with a bit of this British mindset. Look, I spoke vehemently against John Dramani Mahama's government, and at no point did I feel threatened, did I feel my life was in danger. But surprisingly, under the leadership of somebody that we all campaigned and touted to be a human rights activist that spoke vehemently against J.J. Rawlings, the abuse of the media, for him to assume the reins of power and under his leadership, journalists do not feel safe. Trust me, it is appalling. It is real. We don't need any report to confirm that journalists are not safe under this government. Journalists are scared to speak up.
Let's take the example of where security officers have encountered journalists and asked them delete the recording you have on your gadgets. Sometimes a public event and people are covering and yet they are asked to delete. If a security officer is dealing with a journalist in that manner, what do you want the president to do? Because your focus is the president. What do you want the president to do? What has the president done wrong in that regard?
Something, you see, when the overreaching arms of government do things and it does not get curtailed or it does not get washed, then it gives the other security practice, like the policeman who can just tell the journalist to believe. It gives them some level of impetus to act, because after all, it happened and nobody unchecked. It happened and nobody got punished. Somebody, a member of parliament, can put an image of a journalist on a live TV and say that when you meet the person, beat the person and kill the person, and I will pay wherever this matter goes to. The same person comes and say that I know who killed Ahmed Swali, but nothing gets done in about a month, 2, 3, 4. What it does is that it will give these security guys the impetus to do what they do sometimes. Because when government did it, nobody punished them. When a member of parliament did it, nobody punished them. So why, if the security guy does it, anybody will punish them? When we have a government that does these things with impunity, it only goes ahead to give them the impetus to do what they do. That is what I'm trying to say.
You should be familiar with the term media tyranny or tyranny of the media.
Right.
Whilst media advocates and experts do not like us to discuss irresponsibility on the part of media persons in such times, do you think that the media, and whilst an irresponsible conduct should not attract physical attack or even verbal attack, what do you think these also contribute to the responses or reactions that we are complaining about?
Something, you see, I think over time we've made the politicians and the political actors have this kind of feeling that it is their bona fide right for practitioners to do things in their favor. And for that matter, when things don't go the way they expect, they act the way they do. If a media practitioner goes against the values, the ethics, and the principles of journalism, are there not laid down rules and regulations? Are there not institutions that they are supposed to be reported to, like the National Media Commission? And for that matter, these are the institutions that we as a nation have agreed that if any media house, if any media practitioner goes beyond the boundaries that they are supposed to act, you send these reports to these institutions, and you don't go on with physical threats and physical harm and all that. So yes, the media as it stands now, some of them act unprofessionally. Some of them assumes the autonomy of wanting to be the superpower because he has the microphone and the cameras, in front of them. But if they go beyond the parameters set for them to act, no political actor has any right, any business to go on and be threatening them with these harms and threats that comes our way. So yes, the media practitioners sometimes go overboard, but the politicians have the right to act the way they do sometimes.
All right. Hold on for me. Let me go to Afil Money now. And gentlemen and ladies, thank you so very much for your patience. After speaking to Afil Money, after speaking to Afil Money, I'd like to come to you round briefly. List your solutions suggested to what your reality is. Yes, quickly, come in.
I had just wished to state that, you see, we the media are supposed to check these politicians and other state actors like the judiciary for them to do the right thing. But when we have a case where the Journalists Association that was set up from 1949 till today has not been able to put their house in order for over 2 years, the leadership cannot even run a proper elections for us to have a running institution, then it gives these politicians the kind of impetus to act the way they act. Because the Ghana Journalists Association, which used to be a tigorous body that will speak like the Ghana Bar Association, that government will shiver, now it has become defunct. They cannot actually defend anybody in this country. So it makes no politician or political actors become afraid of the journalists and the Ghana Journalists Association. So as our president is about to speak, I would like him to touch on why for 2 years almost They have not been able to run a successful elections to have leadership in place to get the Ghana Association, Journalists Association to work. Maybe he can touch on that as he's about to speak.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, let's hear from Afemoni. You spoke on World Press Freedom Day. You said that the World Press Freedom Index is depressing. You don't find anything wrong with the report?
Samson, as we speak, our hearts are bleeding profusely over the precipitous fall from 30th to the 60th position globally, and from 3rd to the 10th position continentally. A confluence of factors have been outlined in the report, and I thank my colleagues for their anatomic analysis and sometimes the emotional digestion of the issue. But we need to filter this report through the lenses of reality. And the reality is that we have a responsibility collectively to reverse this trend. But before I come out, I go forward with my suggestions. Let me express our solicitude with the number of journalists, but certain journalists who face preponderance of threats in their line of duty. We will continue to stand by them. We will continue to speak out stridently against the threats they face, and we will urge them not to shrink and not to lose out by continuing to do their work without fear or favor. Journalism is not a profession for the lily-livered. Journalism is not a profession for the chicken-hearted. And something you gave an example that you continue to do your work unafraid and unintimidated. This is our calling. On the part of GJ, we do not only criticize, do not issue statements. And I was relieved when he gave one example of how you've rallied to our support, how you've been serving as a lawyer to address some of the threats against journalists. One simple example, when Sechua of Multimedia was molested by Haja Fatih, Samson, you and I remember that we, with urgent promptitude, we organized a press conference, and you followed it up in the court, and Haja Fatih was fined. We, apart from the press releases, we also do a lot of back channel moves. One typical example, we met the IGP a few months ago over the Rambo-style arrest of journalists in the line of duty. And he did assure us that the police will abandon that side and then pass invitations to offend journalists or alleged offenders through the GJA or their heads. This is a way forward. And I believe by pushing together, it is hard that we don't pull in one direction. Example, when Latif Idrisu of Joe FM was brutalized at the citadel of security at police headquarters, the GJA held a press conference and declared a boycott of the police. And I say with all sadness that Joe FM defied that boycott and attended a program called by the police. Another example, two journalists were molested, brutalized in the full glare of the public at the Independence Square. Again, as part of our back channel moves, we had a meeting with the military hierarchy, the CDS. And for the first time, the military apologized and even asked the victims to suggest any compensation they feel will be satisfactory. Their cameras were replaced and they were paid compensation. This has not been put in the public domain. So we are overly concerned over such attacks and will not flinch from doing the needful to address such attacks. And by way of solution, we believe that we need to organize, we need to educate, sensitize journalists on their own safety. And in that direction, we've received assistance from the Norwegian Journalists Union, with which we have organized not less than 10 training programs for journalists to get them to internalize their own safety guidelines so that they reflect them in anything journalistic they do. There are a lot of things we have done in defense of journalists. And I believe something you can testify. Another example, when the modern Ghanaian journalists were arrested, we quickly placed a call to the National Security Minister. He gave us a background. We had a press conference, and something you gave the green light. You were standing by. We were instrumental in getting the 2 journalists released, and the case has died now. Back to the report. We are inclined to believe that it does not obituarize press freedom in Ghana. It does not sound a death knell of free speech in this country. But it serves as a wake-up call for all of us to act to ensure that we bounce back. We can summon the weight of history to look at what happened in 2005 when we were languishing at the 66th position. In 2018, there was a vertiginous rise from to 23rd in the whole world and first in Africa. So the report does not sentence Ghana to any irreversible position. We can bounce back. But it calls for collective action. And one of the actions, as outlined in the response by the Formation Minister, is education of state and non-state actors. Some of the actions, are rooted in ignorance about the work of journalists, what we stand for. Journalists or journalism is the safeguard of freedom. We are the guardrails of democracy. So when you attack a single journalist, you do not only attack all journalists, you attack the very soul of this nation, which is democracy. So in many instances, our soul has been bleeding profusely from such attacks. But it's not enough to bemoan such attacks. We need to move forward to stanch the blood flow by coming together to work in concert to address some of these challenges, no matter how cathedral they are.
Do you share the view that the embarrassment the country has suffered in this report is blamable squarely on government, as in the NPP government regime?
The report does not suggest that the government should take all the blame for what is so embarrassingly pressing. In fact, the government is prominent on the guilty list. There's no two ways about that. The government is prominent on the guilty list because of the actions and inactions by state and non-state actors. For instance, national security operatives, they work directly under Mensah, who is an official of the government. So they should take the blame. But when it comes to the issue of poor remuneration, and we have a media space which is littered by private institutions, and many of them pay their work at slave wages, and this is not the doing of the government. So it will not be fair to blame the government for this situation. And there's a direct relationship between conditions of service and journalistic output. So if many of our people are so compromised, it's because they are not paid well. And in some worst case scenarios, journalists are not paid at all. And as the saying goes, they must survive. And the survival instinct pushes some of them to criminal heights. And this is something we need to look at.
Tell me how you feel to hear almost all the journalists who have spoken this morning on this show express a certain amount of fear just for doing their work and translating into self-censorship, which the report complains of.
Self-censorship is an insidious enemy of press freedom, and we need to look at. We've come a long way from yesteryears when we were shackled by all kinds of laws, when we were enveloped in the so-called culture of silence. And when I used to work at GBC, it was even an offense to play gospel music. We used a story under J.J. Rollins, and that story was as harmless as ever, that Kenya was going to the polls. J.J. Rollins himself called into the newsroom. And his first option, do you know I can search? As I said, for what offense? For using a story. He's urging me to also put elections and hand over. So we've come a long way from those yesteryears, from those hellish period. In fact, we cannot compare journalism practice under J.J. Rollins on those hellish period to what is happening now, even though we have challenges.
In the statement issued by
the two are not.
In the statement issued by the information minister, it is measured and it is accepting of some of the things and then assures of what ought to be done. But it speaks about work that has been ongoing, and among them a certain, structure for the safety of journalists that it speaks about. I am surprised to read about that because the GJA was asked to nominate someone to be on that committee. The GJA sent its letter to me as the one appointed or nominated to represent journalists on the committee. It never called any meeting until we went to elections. As I sit here, I have never been called for anything for that committee. And yet, it is being touted as an institution or a structure that has been set up by government to improve the circumstance.
Again, something we have a collective responsibility to ensure that such structures work. And to me, the report underlines the need for us to amplify our critical voices, to strengthen our independent streak, to solidify our objective bent, to unravel, to expose dark spots, interrogate more than ever before, to hold to account people in positions of power and authority. These are the basic obligations of journalism from which we should not flinch.
All right. Before the elections, I had actually asked Pius Enam Hajide, who was supposed to mobilize the people who have been listed as members of the entity there, and he assured me that, they'll be calling a meeting. It never happened. And then we went for elections. We have returned. We are in May, and we are here listing it as one of the means that government has used to deepen and improve the circumstance. Meanwhile, as far as we are concerned, zero work has happened in this regard. Now, let me now come to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and to get you to begin to share with us what you think is the way forward. And please try and be as brief as you can and straightforward as you can, so that we can, as it were, utilize the time that is left. On the question that was asked of the GJA as to its elections, somehow I happen to be their lawyer, and they had sought to organize elections in 2021. Unfortunately, one member of the GJA took them to court for the delayed process. They had suggested that, COVID and the rest of them had had an impact. And they had issued letters earlier to begin the process. But some of the members also had issues with the list of people qualified to be on the voters list. All of those things culminated eventually to a suit. We went to court to defend the GJA and got the court to make an order for a settlement. By the terms of the settlement, the election should have happened in July, latest in August of 2021. Then today, there's this problem here, the voters list, we can't agree. That is all that has led us to this point. So sometimes I believe that it is unfair to take on Arthur Money as the one who has an interest and therefore entrenching himself over the period. That's all I can say for now. Now, Manasseh, we've gone round, come back to you. Briefly, what can you say is how we should look at this report and what we should be doing?
Briefly, I think three things. First, the leadership of our country should sit up and act. If this report had put Ghana number one, the president and the government would have taken the glory. So they should take the blame and begin to act, especially the president's body language. There are some people in government who are still very friendly. And I have said before that, for instance, I almost always agree with Gabi Ocheredako since the NPP came to power, but I can never say he's intolerant because he will engage you, debate, but he'll do it in a very civil manner. So that is what we expect the government to do. Secondly, the general public, especially the security agencies, should be educated. Sometimes you are prevented from doing your work for no reason. I wanted to take a photograph at Aflao border. Welcome to Ghana. And a soldier confronted me and said this was the security zone. There was no way I could take a picture there. And I don't know what is security about it. Finally, I would want us journalists to also be responsible and use the media responsibly. One of the means to undermine media freedom, even if the government or state actors don't act, is the irresponsible use of the media. Let us use the media, the voices, the platforms we have to unearth the rot and ensure that the right thing is done. And when somebody does something worthy of praise, I don't think there's nothing wrong with extolling their virtues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manasseh. And Evans, in the same order. Yes, Evans. And we know that you had to be going for a function and we held you. We are sorry. Okay, so let me proceed and go to Sawami here. Hello, Sawa. Okay. While she tries to adjust herself, Ifya Pukwa.
Well, something I will comment on a number of issues. Number one, I think that we need a workable professional regulation or policy going forward. And this policy, I think, and I am emphasizing on the word workable, not just theoretical, not just words, not English as we've done in the past, but workable. I think that workable policy or document should speak to media ownership. We should desist from selling frequencies, the National Communication Authority selling frequencies to party officials, members of parliament, party agents who have transmogrified themselves into media owners. This is one of the key issues that is contributing to the self-censorship.
There's supposed to be a broadcasting. There's supposed to be a broadcasting bill. If it were passed into law, then politically exposed persons will not be able to require a license. Once that is not done, and I doubt it will ever be done, you cannot preclude people in politics from participating in the space.
But that's the danger that we'll continue to face if we cannot preclude. Now, like you said, we doubt if the broadcasting bill will be passed. And if ever it is passed, what happens to those who have already acquired these frequencies and are abusing these frequencies and abusing the workers there? This is a conversation we've had in the past. It is still going on. They are still acquiring the frequencies and polluting the environment. And so when we capture the media environment, we capture all these actors. And yet we know the genesis of these people, that these people are not media people. They are not trained media people. They are not people who have worked in the media. They are just political apparatchiks who just want the media platform to pursue their agenda, including one of the things we have emphasized the point here today. It's about controlling the narrative and controlling the minds of ordinary people. One of the things that they are doing, which I'm talking about this policy that it will address, is awareness. President Afemoni spoke about it. Politicians have succeeded in abusing the minds of ordinary people against media people who are fighting for them. So now messengers of the information are the subject of attack instead of the politicians who are the holders of the public purse and who provide no transparency, no accountability. Now on a daily basis, politicians attack media people and they send their trolls. Sewa and Evans have emphasized that point. So this document, which I'm emphasizing the word workable, will deal with it, including these institutions and setup that these politicians have done. Both NDC and MPP have it. What they have is these people who manage the social media landscape. So now, what Afemoni spoke about, Chairman Rollins calling the newsroom, is no longer the modus operandi. The modus operandi is coming at you in social media, denigrating you, attacking you, to the point of I know media people who are now exhibiting signs of depression, who have been diagnosed with depression. So this is a serious issue that we're dealing with. Also, something permit me to speak about the economic issue. We cannot go forward without dealing with the economic issues. Journalists are not paid well. They are not paid well because the institutions that run them are owned by politicians who have no business in paying journalists well. And that's why I think Afemoni and GJ comes in. I think that when we have this workable document, we will insist that no journalist should be paid.
You are paid well. You are paid according to your value. Let everybody work, get their due wages.
Nobody should be paid below minimum wage. That's what I'm talking about. It's not about I probably am being paid because of the years I've worked.
Thank you. And what you bring to the table.
But below minimum wage, even under Ghana labor.
Thank you very much, Efia Pokua. Evans, can we hear you quickly? Hello, Evans has a little problem. Hello, Sawame here. Okay, let's go to Nanaya Mensah.
Hello. Yes, sorry, is that Evans going ahead?
Yes, Nanaya, go ahead.
Okay, I'd agree pretty much with what everybody else is saying. In the same way as one should rightly hold the government to account, and one hopes that, if you like, a more vigorous pursuit of the broadcasting bill and trying to see some form of it passed. I don't know that I'd agree outright with the idea that political actors should have no right to own media. Across the world, there are political actors who own media. But I think, say, other interests should be encouraged to go into media ownership and professionalize the media. We have to kind of hold the light up to ourselves and also scrutinize ourselves. There are large parts of the media that fail to meet any kind of acceptable standards of professionalism.
I agree with you on that note too.
Held to account often enough for their lack of standards. Obviously, I wouldn't be talking about multimedia there. And encourage balance. We should also try very hard not to be both judge and jury in our own case. So in this exceptional circumstance, we're talking about abuses of journalists and poor conditions of work and so on. And we're in the exceptional position of having the tools at our disposal to hit back at the public or the government or the state or whoever we think it is that is the source of our problem, and therefore present a very one-sided view of things. So I think we have to live up to our own standards. If people are feeling threatened and, for example, have to go as far as leaving the country in order to ensure their own personal safety, they should also acknowledge when they are able to return in the same environment, presumably under conditions of safety, and continue to work and live normally in this country.
All right.
Perhaps not just necessarily ascribe it to political factors. And then I'd say the concluding part of the Minister of Information's statement about ongoing dialogue between the government and journalists should be welcomed, and he should be pushed to hold true to his promises.
That's right.
I think this is a case of journalists just want to be loved. A lot of us are very insecure creatures. I won't say that this is true about myself or not, but we want to feel appreciated for the job of work that we do, for holding up the public interest, defending the public interest,
right.
and feel when we speak truth to power, power listens. And that's just to do with more open dialogue and
right.
more of a sense of openness on both sides.
Thank you so very much. So I'm here, or Evans, let's hear Evans first.
Yes, I'm saying, I think we've talked a lot about the GJA, but also the National Media Commission. I think the National Media Commission should be more assertive. It should rediscover its voice, especially when it comes to the circumstances in which the journalists work, the concerns about safety, the self-censorship issues, the economic issues. I think we shouldn't leave this to the GJA to lead. I mean, GJA is an association. The NMC is a constitutional body. And I think they should lead the conversation on how to deal with this. Of course, the Information Ministry in the statement says they want to work, enhance their collaboration with the NMC. I think we should move beyond the rhetoric and get the NMC pulling everybody else to the table to address the fundamental issues that have led to this very poor ranking.
Thank you, Evans. You repeated NMC. Manasseh started on the note that there are trust issues with the NMC because of the historic situation where it is a government, sponsored person who is the head of the institution. But there are technocrats there as well. Let's hear from Liz Hefron Asari. Please unmute.
Sorry. I heard you when you spoke about money and where the stance is with GJA and the elections, but it has been 2 years. And for me, it is worrying that he's still carrying himself out as the GJA president. If I was him, I wouldn't do so, because even if the thing is in court, still, his mandate is over, and it was over 2 years ago. And charity begins at home. If we as journalists cannot have a house in order, how do we expect anybody to want to look at us and help us? So we need to start at home. Again, if I was working in somebody's chambers for 20, 30 years, it won't make me a lawyer because I've been in the chambers that long. If I was working in a hospital, as an orderly for that length of time, it doesn't make me a nurse, it doesn't make me a doctor.
That's right.
So we need to look at that seriously. We need to define who a journalist is. If we do so and we raise our value, we won't be complaining about poor remuneration, because people who set up organizations would know that they have to go for qualified people, and the qualified people have a value on them.
All right.
And then you will get people respecting journalists and behaving towards them in a way that we all expect. Until we do so, we have a long way to go to clean up the mess that is.
Thank you very much. We have 2 minutes left. Let's see how you can deal with a minute each. Okotechie Frifa Mensah, let's hear you. Please unmute.
Okay, something very simple. I think until the hypocrisy in our media landscape comes to a halt, we will continue to face these kind of things. When I talk about the hypocrisy, it's about certain classism within the media space where when certain things happen to a certain group of people, we don't give it the same mileage as when it happens to those we believe to be more journalists than others. Again, I think that we must all come together with one voice to speak for those who are underpaid in our media landscape, because if a journalist is not paid well, it is a threat to himself and a threat to the profession.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
In the ending, I think that Afro Money and his executives, they've done more harm than good to the face of journalism in this country. And if possible, all of them should step aside for us to have a new leadership that will rebrand JJ.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's hear Mr. Arthur Money. There's supposed to be elections July, is it 24?
24th July, the elections will be held, and I know journalists are addicted to voting wisely. So they would like wise officers to take over the GJ, despite the attacks, orchestrated attacks from Lisa Okuteche. And let me borrow a Malian proverb says, no one figure can wash the face. Contextually, no one institution can address the issues outlined in the reports, no matter how damning by that borders. And we need to orchestrate a national conversation on some of the solutions, like salary of poor salaries of journalists, and of course the ownership structure in the media.
I'm very sorry, but this is where we end it. I'm very sorry about that. My outfit is by Habil's Couture. You can call them 0200 84 1988, and my guests have been Okuteche Afrifa Mensah, who is media practitioner and chief, Sewa Ame here, broadcast journalist, GHTV. Arthur Money is with the GJA. Let's hear from Asari, is journalist, media consultant. Efia Pukua is broadcast journalist and programs director at the Despite Media Group. Nanaya Mensah is supervising editor at Asari Radio. Manasseh Azuri Awune is editor-in-chief, The Fourth Estate. And Evans Mensah is head, political desk, Joy News and Joy FM. I'm Samson Ladi Anyanini. Afternoon. See you next week, God willing.